Do the New York City subways have security? Which Chinatown is best? What borough would I recommend you stay in outside of Manhattan? Today I'll be answering some really good viewer-submitted questions. You don't want to miss it. Do the subways have any security? The short answer to this question is no. But let's take a step back. 665 miles of track, about 3 million people ride every single day, and there's 472 stations. Even if you had full-time security on every single train at every single station, could they actually be inside of every single subway car as well? After the unfortunate shooting in April, Mayor Adams was even proposing putting weapons detectors at the subway stations. The problem is none of that technology has been proven to work at a very large scale, which New York City would need, and think of all the potential delays that would lead to as well. Now, you do tend to see police at the biggest subway stations, Grand Central, Port Authority, but at a lot of the smaller stations, you're not gonna see them too often. Sometimes they're riding the trains. The good news is that millions of people ride the New York City subway daily without incident. It's those rare exceptions that make all the headlines. Yes, you can ride in the same subway car as the conductor. We talked about that in our last video, 25 amazing New York City tips. There's also call boxes, but I personally think the best security that you can have is paying attention and trying to get yourself out of scary situations as quickly as possible. I take the subway multiple times a week, and I've actually seen less sketchy stuff in the last few months. I don't know if enforcement is up. I don't know if I've just been lucky with that. Which Brooklyn neighborhood has the largest Mexican population? My wife is from Puebla and will be back to New York soon. You're in luck. Actually, about a year ago, we shot a great video in Sunset Park, Brooklyn. They have a very large Latino population there near Sunset Park, a lot of Mexican restaurants. Check that video out if you love Mexican food and want to see some of the best that New York City has to offer. Just got back recently from New York and really disappointed with a couple of things. Firstly, legalizing cannabis. The city stinks, not to mention the amount of street hawkers hanging around selling spliffs in front of the police who can't do a thing. Secondly, the quality of beer has gone down whilst the price has skyrocketed. A lot of complaints going on. We'll start with the legalization of marijuana, which began about 1 year ago, and here's the law. It's now legal for adults 21 and older to possess up to 3 ounces of cannabis and up to 24 grams of concentrated cannabis for personal use in New York. Adults may smoke or vape cannabis wherever smoking tobacco is allowed under the smoke-free air laws, with a few exceptions. Yeah, you're gonna smell weed right now in New York City. Granted, in the past, you still would have smelled it anyway, just not as much. And the biggest offender here, I would say, is Washington Square Park. I swear, it smells like you're at a Fish concert sometimes, walking through there. But the good news is that nobody is gonna be smoking weed at any restaurants, indoors or outdoors, at least not legally, and you're gonna see this a lot more in Manhattan than anywhere else. As for the second part about the quality of beer going down and the prices going up, it's not just beer. Due to inflation, for the first time, I'm seeing $13 mixed drinks, cocktails at $20 or higher. It's every type of alcohol. My suggestion for beer in New York City, we actually had a question or two as well about breweries. Long Island City has an entire brewery trail, which would be a really fun afternoon activity. Gowanus, Brooklyn, near where I live, also has about 4 or 5 breweries, so that could be another area that you could explore. Best hidden parks and quiet spots. My favorite all time is the Elevated Acre. I've put it into tons of our videos. It's this little oasis in the financial district. I've never taken anybody there who wasn't super impressed by it.
Surprised that you can actually get a really good view of the Brooklyn Bridge.
And finding it is half the fun. Best place to go in NYC for afternoon tea experience. All right, I don't think New York is known for its afternoon tea like a London would be. And there's some really famous ones at hotels like the Palace, which is gonna run you a lot of money. My suggestion would be Prince Tea House. I went one time to their location in the East Village. It's one of my favorites. They have a tea set, one price per person. Really Instagrammable and not super touristy, so that would be my suggestion. Best place for live jazz right now. Boy, do I have a cool answer for you. I actually just discovered a new jazz night at a rooftop bar. It's called Somewhere Nowhere in Chelsea. Now, all the way at the top, there is a rooftop bar with some amazing views and a pool. That's cool enough. But on Wednesday nights, they have something special called Gotham Jazz Night. It's from 6 till 11 p.m. And not only do they have good jazz music, but they've got swing dancing, burlesque. There's no cover charge. This will be a cool date. This would also be equally cool for my singles out there. You guys know I get a lot of DMs from people asking me about creating itineraries for them or activity suggestions, and I just don't have the time to respond to them. But I'd like to introduce you to the sponsor of today's video who can do just that, AskKhonsu, and this is where I'm sending everybody who needs help planning their New York City trip. They're a team of local trip consultants, and their specialty is planning, which takes a lot of time for you guys. Instead of searching tons of websites, you can just ask Khonsu. You tell them what you're looking to do in New York City, and you can get pretty specific. Attractions to experiences like rooftops. Maybe you need tips on what sporting event to go to or a comedy show. What about tours, even hotel bookings and transportation? You pay $12.99 for 12 activities, and it even comes with a cool map. They sent me a sample itinerary and I approve of these choices. Summit, Prospect Park, Coney Island. They even included some sample sales, aka shopping, which I have absolutely no expertise in. They even created a special landing page to get 10% off for my subscribers. And if you want, you can even post your favorite video from my channel so they know exactly what you're into. Check out the link down below in the description. Ask Khonsu for your next trip to New York City. How much of a problem are bugs, rats in your apartment? I lived 9 years in Greenwich Village and I never once saw a rat, and I think once or twice ever I saw a cockroach. In my current apartment in Brooklyn, this past winter, we actually had a little mouse in the apartment. We saw him a few times. It wasn't anything that scary, and he probably came in from the street because it was cold out. Just because you see a rat in your apartment in New York City, it's not always your building's fault. It could be a restaurant downstairs from where you're staying. It could be the building on the left or the right. As long as you have a good landlord, any issue like that should be taken care of very quickly. What are some good ideas for parents visiting NYC? How to show them a good time around Manhattan? Fun ideas that aren't skewed too young or hip. Well, if you bring your mom or dad to a club or bar, I don't know, some people might find that kind of cool. But outside of the obvious, like Broadway or restaurants, one thing could be going to a museum with them. How about Poster House? I loved my one trip there, and I could totally see my parents enjoying it. Another is Birdland Jazz Club. I recall the last time I was there was a table to the right of us. It was parents with the 2 adult kids, and I thought to myself, this would be a cool place to bring the parents. You can buy dinner and drinks as well. Ian asks, what are the best neighborhoods in every borough in your opinion? Safety, food, parks, prices, etc. All right, why don't we narrow this down for tourists, because otherwise it's gonna be too difficult. We'll start in Staten Island. I'll go with St. George because it's right by the ferry terminal. Some good pizza options there, as well as the outlet mall. Moving on to Brooklyn, let's say Dumbo because it's right next to the Brooklyn Bridge. You can take the ferry there. You also have the Time Out New York Food Market, as well as some amazing pizza spots. Queens, I'm gonna say Jackson Heights for the adventurous tourist who really wants to feel the diversity of New York City and all the amazing food options. Bronx, I'll go with Arthur Ave, which is located in Belmont, because I think that is the best Little Italy in New York City. And finally, in Manhattan, let's say Greenwich Village. It's a mixture of old school New York. It's hip, it's vibrant, it's got some amazing places to eat, Washington Square Park as well. And I used to live there, and I can tell you all tourists visiting that neighborhood always tell me how much they loved it. Are you nervous about the cost of raising a baby in New York City? I'm not so nervous about the costs of actually raising the kid in New York as far as food and supplies. Childcare is not going to be a big issue, as Adriana and I both work from home. What scares me is the cost of living and rent, because because I don't know how long we're gonna make it in this apartment, which is only 1 bedroom with a baby, maybe a year or 2, but after that, how much will it cost to rent in Brooklyn? And if we wanna have more than 1 kid, costs just keep going up and up. That's what scares me most, housing. Which Chinatown is better? Well, I guess you asked that question thinking there's only 2 Chinatowns. There's actually 3 Chinatowns in New York: Manhattan, Queens, and Brooklyn. We've covered all of them on the channel. In fact, I have an entire Chinatown playlist, which you could find up above. My personal favorite is the Chinatown in Flushing, Queens. It's the most modern, and also it's not touristy at all. It has an endless supply of amazing Asian cuisine, not just Chinese. You can get good Korean wings there, other countries. Definitely give Flushing a look if you want my favorite Chinatown. Why do people choose to live in NYC and pay crazy amounts for rent instead of just living in other big cities like Miami, Houston, Atlanta, where rent would be much cheaper? Well, there's a reason that rents are cheaper in those cities, because there's a lot less going on in those places, with no disrespect to any of those choices. In fact, I love Miami, I love Chicago. I think those are great US cities to visit. I probably could even live in them. That being said, I think there's a certain electricity, there's a certain magnetism about New York City that just draws people here from all corners of the world. If you can't find it in New York, you really can't find it anywhere. And there's just so much going on here. It feels like you're living in the center of the universe sometimes, and that's why rent is more expensive. But when you actually look at the costs of a lot of other goods, even restaurants sometimes, shopping, you're not gonna find that big of a difference between New York and many other US cities. Update on crime and safety for tourists. Now, as a tourist, do I think you have to worry? Well, let me put it to you this way. If there was a rise in crime against tourists, I promise you every major media outlet would cover it. They would cover it like crazy. It would be big news, but as you see it in the papers, it's just a blanket statement about crime being up. Yes, shoplifting is up, robberies are up, stuff like that. But as a tourist, I would still say to be vigilant when you travel, but I don't think you've got too much to worry about, assuming that you are not heading for some of the dangerous neighborhoods of New York City or just wandering around by yourself at 3 o'clock in the morning. If you went back for a second visit and chose to stay outside of Manhattan, which borough would you stay in? Which hotel? Great channel. Thank you. I'm actually not someone that's really good at recommending hotels. I always tell people, check TripAdvisor, Google reviews, and any hotel that you're about to book in New York. I would say Queens or Brooklyn. Brooklyn if you're more into the architecture and the vibe and the history. Some beautiful neighborhoods here with brownstones. Granted, you're probably not gonna find a hotel there. The other choice would be Queens, and I think Queens is for my foodies out there. But also, it's near Manhattan, Astoria, or Long Island City would be 2 good choices. If you've never visited here before, one of my most popular videos ever was 12 things every first timer must do when they visit New York City. I still stand behind this video. Check it out. If you haven't seen it, you won't regret it.